Welcome to the New Generation Leader Podcast. We're giving you the tools you need to lead in the digital world. Ready to reach your true potential? This is the New Generation Leader Podcast.
Jeremy, you've spent a lot of time with leaders in a lot of sectors, in a lot of cities, in a lot of corners of our world. One of the things that I love talking about, and I loved this conversation we had together about influence a few months ago, seeing where your mind was 10 years ago, 12 years ago about that subject. Thinking about relationships and influence and how we build that. What's that like when we aren't intelligent about our relationships and we're just blind and running on autopilot? How does that hold us back?
Yeah, I ran into three leaders, in quotes, because they have important jobs, who are relationally unintelligent in the last 24 hours. And the relationally unintelligent person, they're unaware that they're losing influence. And that influence is simply like, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be to the point where you're literally losing your reputation as you're going about your day. Now, they might have been in their head. They might have been thinking about some certain things. One had earphones in. The other two people were but they missed the opportunity. Like, there's a time and place when you know you're going to be on, and there's a time and place when you know you're going to be off. And so if you're a leader, if you're someone who has any positional authority or literally influence authority, then being aware of your environment and who you're around, who you're with, is a really, really big deal. And in fact, I teach my kids this all the time. I just call it intro, outro. Intro, outro. Intro is I'm walking in a room. Someone walks in the room. What's my intro to them? I'm leaving a room. What's my outro to them? And it's so simple. It's the little big things. But if you could actually be aware of the fact that any little intros and outros affect your influence and your reputation, because people can go, what a jerk. That guy's a jerk. Because why? Because he didn't say goodbye. Because the way he looked on the way out. Well, that guy might have been in his head, or that gal may have been in their heads about something that's going on. They're unaware of their behavior. So in their mind, they're like, what's the big deal? Seriously? And yet it is a big deal to the majority of the population, because it's the way that people are treated and feel when you come in and when you leave. So
those are big markers, and so often we don't focus on that. It's funny, as you're talking about outros, one of our good friends we were with this weekend at my wife's college reunion. This was a big one, ending at a 0-year reunion.
Yep.
And so we're hanging out, and people from their class milling about at dinner. And one of our friends was in a conversation with somebody he didn't really know. And a couple of us heard him and then gave him a hard time about his outro. But his outro truly at the core was influence building. It was generous. And what he said was, hey man, it was good to see you. I got to run inside and catch up with the kids, make sure they're doing okay. But hey, if there's ever anything I can do for you, let me know. And that was what we heard. As we debriefed with him later, his intent in that was, hey, if I can get you anything from inside, a drink, he was in the moment. But the way he said it and presented it was such a big, generous statement. And so, we kind of laughed and gave him a hard time, little elbow. But that kind of outro, he's a genuine guy. It carried through. And a lot of times I think we miss those, definitely intros, outros. I read a book a few years ago about parties and hosting, which I know you love, setting the stage for that event. But this book talked about is The Art of Gathering, talks about from the very beginning, the invitation, how you go about the invitation starts setting the stage for what's going to happen at the table. And so laying the groundwork from the very beginning puts us in that right headspace to then have a transformative conversation.
Absolutely. And so when you think about relationships that you're in, a lot of times just the way that you've treated people in the past will affect the way they view you in the present. So
Mm.
your past is really important. And if you need to clean up the past by saying, you know what, Aaron, I just got to tell you, I've been reading some things. I read the Communication Code or whatever, some book on, and it was so enlightening. And I realized that I'm so in my head that sometimes I could probably come across as a jerk or I'm not interested, but I really am. But I'm an introvert or I'm a such and such, or but would you forgive me? Like I wanna work, I'm working on that. And just know that when we're together, I'm gonna be working on our communication, relational trust. I'm gonna be working hard to, really connect. So cleaning up the past sets the stage for the present. And if you really, really want to unlock relationships, then you're going to have to understand your past tone, your whether you brought support or challenge, whether your positional power, your authority, whatever, could actually do a lot of damage to people without you being aware of it. And if people really knew, they'd be like, "Are you kidding me? What? Oh no, that's not my intent at all." So that internal insight, like the view, it creates awareness. Awareness would be knowing yourself, should lead to leading yourself, which leads to behavior change, where you start doing things differently than you've done in the past. Like if you want different relational dynamics with people and it's not going well, you're going to probably have to do things you've never done before. And you're going to have to change in a dramatic way. And that's what, I've been writing on. And that's what I've been spending a lot of time on in this last season. And again, we've got a book launch coming out here in November. And so it's really exciting just to be able to help people process relational dynamics because they're so vital.
So let's move towards the book launch, not all the way there yet, but let's talk about intent and that narrative in our minds and the disconnect that can happen between what we intend but what actually comes out. What have you seen in some of these relationally unintelligent leaders and experiences you've had? Where's that mismatch between intent and what's received?
Yeah. So intent are really intentions. Intentions are really expectations. They all go together. They're tied together, right? So I have expectations with my wife that we are going to go on a walk and have a conversation about such and such or whatever. And she doesn't know that's my intent because she can't read my mind. Or I have a good friend and my intent is that we would get more time together, but I haven't showed that I have time to do that. And so I have good intentions, but missed expectations are that they would expect me to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm not doing it. So intentions without action, they get us in a lot of trouble. And there's a lot of people with really good intentions. I was planning to, but you didn't, right? And so that's where missed expectations come up.
Hmm.
And most drama that happens in any organization, team, or relationship is missed expectations. Now, sometimes our expectations, as you and I know, the expectation scale, they're really unrealistic. They're almost impossible. Hey, you're my new best friend. We're gonna get together every other day. We're gonna hang out. We're gonna spend time. We're gonna do a barbecue. We're gonna do like, yeah, I've got a family. We're gonna have to lower those expectations.
Hmm.
So getting to realistic expectations. And what I found is, and when Steve and I were writing this book, we did a lot of research and talked to a lot of people. But we just kept running into this idea that people don't share expectations. They have them,
Mm.
but they don't share them. And those expectations get unmet. Over time, it starts to limit our expectations, and then we get to a point of resigned expectations.
Mm.
You know what, Aaron is just, he's just that way. I've kind of given up. Sure, whatever. I've got a friendship right now, and I'm trying to decide, is it worth it or not? One of my closest friends from way back, but it's just times changed, families changed. It's like, I don't think he wants to. And I'm kind of deciding, do I want to? So our expectations of one another have drifted so far. And I'm kind of like, well, maybe that's just the way it's supposed to be. Maybe that was just a season and a time, right? So it's what we're after is giving language and the opportunity to figure out what's worth it and what's not worth it.
All right, so take us into the book, Jeremie. This is the communication code coming out this week as we release. I think tomorrow is actually the release day. So walk us through why the communication code.
So actually, the concept was written 7-8 years ago, but it was just the right timing. Now the idea is that every one of us has an expectation about another relationship, and we have an ideal code word that we're really wanting, an expectation word. Like, Aaron, when we're together, here's what I'm wanting from you right now. And if I were to give you the code, you would know exactly how to communicate with me. But what happens is oftentimes people are completely unaware, or they just do what they've always done inside a relationship, and they just naturally, critique or share their ideas when it's not warranted or wanted, or they miss the code words, they miss the clues and the signs of the relational dynamic because they're either too busy or they just think that's what the other person wants. So what happens then is it literally causes the other person to put up a wall of kind of self-preservation and fold their arms and lean back and like, yeah. And they send verbal, like nonverbal cues. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Aaron. Good to see you, bud. I gotta go. And they back out. And Aaron's like, what was that about? And then you go on about your day and you miss the clue that you miscommunicated. You actually cause more of a wall, not less of one. And therefore your cues and clues theirs weren't met, and the relationship suffers. And it really was the story. And Aaron, again, I'd love to hear you've experienced it. You've used the communication code, which we can get into, but I'd love to also hear a story maybe of you and how it's affected you, whether in your marriage or in another relationship as well. So anyway, that is the reason behind it. We wanted to create a code word, almost like the Enigma code in World War II. Once you figure out the code of a person, you can hear all of their messages, and it's no longer cryptic, and it's no longer an enigma. It actually helps you unlock relationships every single conversation that you have.
I think going back to that word intent, so often we don't realize we know what we're trying to communicate or what we need, but until you break down this tool of the code, we don't realize that our intent could be different and it looks different and that we even need a code. But I'm going to zoom back out to 30,000 feet before we get into the tool itself, because I think my favorite part of this tool is the overarching picture of, in communication, there's two sides. And if the transmission isn't received, it may as well just not even have been communicated. Don't waste your breath communicating this if you aren't using the code, laying out expectations, and even understanding. And I think through all of my personal conversations. Um, Good ones, bad ones for me personally, experiences I've been in. I was telling you, I had coffee with a friend a little while ago, and I was recapping for him some of my life experience and where I had been, how I'd seen my voice play out in different settings. And as I think about that and the intent, I have had to purposefully shift my intent to communicate, even in silence, my lack of communicating sometimes. I got to communicate the intent that, hey, I'm creating space and time for other people to communicate, because my tendency would be to just push and drive and railroad. And so I know I've done that, and I know I still do that in some settings. And so I can vacillate between, hey, I'm pushing or I'm pulling off the pedal. But if I'm not explicit in sharing, hey, I'm pulling off the pedal on purpose, then it looks like on the other side that I'm withdrawing. So there's two sides to this communication equation. And no wonder everybody we come in contact with, I think, their root issue that a team or an individual relationship, even entire companies, I hear so often, communication's our issue. We're having a problem with communication.
Right. Oh yeah.
We need help
Totally.
fixing this. Communication is our thing. So I'm so
Mhm.
excited that we're talking communication. You guys have
Mhm.
written this book specifically on communication so that we can start this
Yeah,
conversation.
and it's actually, think about it, it's communication inside of relational dynamics. There's one thing to communicate. Hey, I'd communicate. I talked to the delivery driver. That's a transaction. We're talking about communication inside relationships. How many relationships in your life are not at the highest level? If you said 10 was your highest, best ever, couldn't be better, that's 10. Now rank 10 people in your life, 10 of your closest relationships, or 10 people that you spend the most amount of time with. Rank those relationships. Well, with John, I'm a 7. With Sarah, I'm a 6. With Tom, I'm an 8. And you go all the way through. And with these people, I'm a 3, 4, 4, 3. Why? What goes on? Well, they wear me out. They don't stop talking. They don't seem interested in me. It's always about them. They're toxic, whatever the issue is. And so so it kind of ties all of this in, this intent, expectations, communication. So for me, this came, for those who wanted to know where this came from, we created an actual tool, code sequence, 5 code words that you can use that unlock people. And it came from Steve Cochran and I, my business partner. I'd come back. I was living back in America. I had been in the UK for a number of years. And then I came back and we were working on this one project. And Steve and I agreed to kind of the terms. So like, here's what we think we ought to do when we're with them. Well, when I was with them, the terms changed, but they weren't bad. They just were different. It wasn't a big deal, but we got the business. We got it. It's just not how we thought it was going to be, but we still got it. And it was still very good for us. And anyway, so I had this meeting in the States. I came back to meet with Steve. I was so excited to see him. And then I had a list of things I wanted to talk about, but this was the top of my list. So I just assumed we're at this place called Jack and Alice, this cool little coffee shop in George Cross. And we were sitting there, and it was kind of a brisk day outside, and it just kind of a warm feeling. I think it was even around the holidays. It kind of just felt very festive. So I was excited, and I just said, man, Steve, I'm just so fired up. I got to tell you, with this deal, I won't say the name, but this deal, we got it. We landed it like just 2 days ago. And I held off from telling you because I wanted to tell you in person, but I'm so excited. And, we high-fived, and then I go, it's going to be different than what we thought. Instead of X, Y, and Z, it's actually going to be A, B, and C. But I was there to celebrate. That's really what I wanted. Steve wanted to collaborate, but it showed up as critique, which was, we found that's the norm for him historically. And I mean, we all have it. I have a norm. He has a norm. You do. All of us. We have a default tendency. So he starts going, but that's not how we said it was going to be. And I go, yeah, but I mean, it's ABC, not XYZ. It literally is. It's all happening. Yeah, but, and then he goes into this questioning that in his mind was collaboration. To me, it was critique, which equaled critical. And all of a sudden, all of the past of Steve came back to me, because that's what I had experienced in my 2 years of living in the same world with him. I had experienced that same thing. So all of the past started to dredge up. And all of a sudden, I went from high five and smile and excitement to leaning back, arms starting to get folded. I start turning red in his critique because I thought it was excessive to what the deal was. The deal still happened. This is minor, not major. And so I stopped speaking, and he's like, man, I know I've upset you. What's happened? And he goes, you always get defensive. Right. And that set off this argument. So we had this epic fight in the middle of Jack and Alice when I was wanting to have this amazing celebration. I wasn't looking for a parade. I was literally just looking to celebrate this thing we worked 6 months on. And right then and there, we stopped and we built the communication code, because I said, this is what I was looking for, Steve. And he goes, I was looking for celebration. And maybe you could clarify where you have questions, but I wasn't looking for critique or any feeling of being critical. I don't even want to collaborate right now. I just want to, and we wrote down the words with the 5 words right there, the code words, and we kind of figured out what was happening. And that happens all the time. It happens in every relationship where someone misses the code word of what the desired expectation would be of the other person, but the other person doesn't share it. And in my case with Steve, I wanted to say, well, why wouldn't you know? Just being relationally intelligent, you would know what I was wanting. And in his mind, he goes, well, why didn't you tell me? If you really wanted it, you would have told me. And that's where we created the communication code. And so we've been using it for 7-8 years inside the giant ecosystem. It's just time for it to become a book.
Oh, and one of my favorite things, and I say this to teams when we walk through these codes, is that we can feel like we need to go teach the code to somebody else in order to use it. And my favorite thing about this is the code words. You can use it. Hey, can we celebrate this right now? I know the word. It makes sense to you, and I've given it to you. You don't know anything about the communication code, but I've fed you the code word. So now you're ready to celebrate. And for me, care is the one that I struggle with the most. I'm guessing that's probably similar to Steve as well.
Yeah.
And I see all the time.
And me too.
Yeah. My wife reminds me, hey, our daughters, they don't need you to critique. They don't need you to collaborate. They need you to care. And in this moment, that's all they need. And so I take that reminder then and filter through the situation, because, the girls are younger. They're still working on developing that skill of leading themselves to feed me and feed us the code. But I can pay attention to that code and recognize, hey, it's time for a different code right now. Let me shift my intent from autopilot to intentionality and bring that intent forward.
Absolutely. No, it makes it just makes sense. So for those listening, there's 5 code words. Can I go ahead and give it to them?
Yep, go for it.
Yeah. So celebration, there's care, there's clarity, clarification, sort of clarify, there's collaboration, and there's critique. And there's a time for each one of those. But it's really, what is the other person looking for in that moment? Sometimes you'll be like, hey, I just need you to care. I need to talk. And I don't really want any critique. I'm not here to collaborate. put those tools up. I just need you to listen. Zip the lips, open ear. I just need to talk. And, that will happen in a lot of relationships, in a few relationships, especially the more intimate they are. You need a place. And sometimes that can be nurturers can do it, a spouse or a child. But there's also care, like Steve, who's a pioneer. He needs care. He says stuff to me like, hey, can I just talk?